everyone for joining in. So this panel discussion, we are going to talk about FOSS, how somebody can contribute, support, and evangelize free and open source software. In this panel, we have Manish. Manish is co-founder of MProfit. We have Anas Khan. He's a tech enthusiast, FOSS evangelist, and sophomore engineering student. We have Dhiraj. He's a full stack developer at Ironforge. He's a student and he is also a Google Summer of Code mentor. And he has participated in multiple open source programs. We have Saurav. He is community manager at Amplification. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining in once again. So my first question, most of the organizations that are leveraging FOSS to build their business are not really giving back to the community. Why they should give it back, and how, and what are some ways they can do it?
All right, we're almost at the home stretch, so please everyone keep awake. So as you mentioned, my name is Manish Chain. I'm a co-founder of MProfit. We've been bootstrapping for the last 14 years, but I also advise other startups on their technology strategy. And one of the things I like to do is work with these startups and help them go down the path of open source, and hence the reason why I'm here. And one of the things I always get a lot with these startups that I work with is, Microsoft products are well known, and how do they compare to open source? And when I tell them that companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, all of them run on open source, they're very surprised. So I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done in the startup space for founders that are not technical. So the technical founders understand open source. I'll give you a real quick story. I was working with a founder who is very non-technical, and when I told him, let's start using open source, and then we got into that journey, we started using it, we started deploying it, then I told him, why don't we start, publishing blog posts about some of the technology we're using? And he actually said, oh my God, do we want to do that? Then we'll give away our secret sauce. And I said, you using AWS is not anything secret. So, but they have this mindset that, by talking about it, that they're somehow giving away the secrets of their company. And I always tell people that contributing to open source is not just about giving back to the code base or a repo. It's a lot of things. It could be writing a blog post. It could be talking about it on YouTube, social media, all of those things. Even redesigning someone's web page. That's a way of kind of giving back to the community. And I think that's my whole purpose here. Is I haven't coded in like 25 years, so I'm probably the last person to talk about GitHub. But the truth is, I always talk about how we should give back in some way, and if it's not through coding, it's by writing blog posts. I've got a blog for the last 18, 19 years, and some of the blog posts I talk about are very very technical. I wrote one that is a 4-part series on how to build an IoT device. And in fact, I kind of was working with someone saying, Adi, you should take that blog post down now, because people will know how to do it. And I go, but that's the idea, is to kind of share. And what I tell people is open source is about reviewing code, remixing, and redistributing. And that's what I think the whole philosophy of open source should be. And that's what I tell companies to kind of go down that path.
Yeah, that makes sense. Writing about how they make use of open source technologies definitely helps. So a quick note on that. So at FOSS United, we have a FOSS pledge where we request organizations, companies to sign this pledge where they openly pledge about, openly give credit to the FOSS that they use, wherever they find appropriate to put somewhere on the website, or while they are promoting or marketing their technologies. Another pledge is encourage their developers and technical staff to create and contribute to FOSS. And similarly we have a couple of more notes, publishing notes about and FOSS related activities that they have done or if they are planning to do. And we launched it, I think, a couple of months back during India FOSS, 6 months back, and we have got around 30 places. So the goal is to, whoever, if you are part of any organization here, please reach out to your founder or some of your lead in the tech, or if you are lead, please sign up this pledge. You can just search on, search engine FOSS pledge. You'll get the link. Hopefully, we are that good on SEO. At least we are Google. We have that good search engine optimization. So you also should check out the FOSS pledge. Yeah. Now coming to Saurav Jain. So what are some ways to build inclusive and welcoming and successful FOSS communities in India, or anywhere where you study or you work? How do we build active community?
So, hey everyone. There is no particular framework that I can tell you that this is how we can make a successful open source community. But I am working as a community manager for an open source company for the last 1.5 years. And I've done various programs in order to build a community which gives feedback, which opens issues for the product and make PRs. So I can tell you the ways or the programs which we have done in the last 1.5 years in order to achieve that, and how we growed our community from like 500 developers to 40,000 developers currently. So first thing first, you should know while creating a community, what are your channels? Where are you going to manage your whole community? Where are you going to talk with them? Where are you going to give them updates? Where will be your support section? Or where you will handle your meetups, virtual meetups? Is it going to be meetup.com? Is it going to be YouTube? Or is it your the forum you are using for your community? The second thing I will say, let us assume you have a community of like 500 developers or 1,000 developers. As a community manager, I have seen that 90% of the developers in the community are silent observers. They are not very vocal in the community. So your goal is not just to engage with those 10%, because when you are talking about creating a community that is welcoming, that is inclusive, you have to take views from everyone. We have to take views from everyone. We have to ask them if they are having some issues or maybe some feedback, maybe some anything. So the goal is to make 90% vocal. So I took some initiatives in order to make them vocal. I can tell that. So some people do mistakes while making communities, that they just talk about their product when they are creating a community. They just give them updates. They use their community as an update center. That we have this update, we have this new feature, we have this thing. This is very marketing. And to be honest, this is a fact that developers do not love marketing at all. They love organic things. So when you start talking about general trendy things happening in tech, for example, ChatGPT is very famous. And I heard that GPT-4 is coming recently. So this Monday, I'll go to my community, I'll share my views on GPT-4 and ask everyone about their views. So from that 90%, hardly 5% or 6% of them will reply. And if I'll get some good replies, even good replies, then I'll reward them with some swags or something. So I'll encourage new replies. The second thing, when we're talking about inclusive communities, we should not forget the fact that we should make our open source project inclusive for the beginners as well. So when a beginner wants to contribute to any open source project, the most difficult thing I have seen is that they find the code base very overwhelming. So for example, I am working in a company who creates a whole backend or auto-generates the backend. The code base is so large, there are many files, thousands of files. No one knows which file do which thing. So at first, it is very overwhelming. Even for an experienced developer, it is overwhelming. You cannot expect a beginner to contribute at the very first time. So there are three things I have noticed in this. I will share this. First is that your project do not have enough code first issues. So this is the first problem. When you have enough, when I'm saying you do not have enough good first issues, I mean that maybe you don't have issues which only include contributions only in one file or two files. You don't have issues that are UI related, documentation related, or maybe a bug fix, maybe a README fix, which are very simple, just to introduce some new developer to your open source project. Second thing is support. So let's assume someone picked up issue and started working on it. They might get some problem in it. It's very obvious. Maybe your product installation is tough. Maybe they get some problem with Git. They stop in between. So it's your responsibility as a team that you are managing that support thing very well. They do not, when they pick the issue, you should make sure they have contributed. They have not lost in between just because of some problems. So you should give priority support to them. And the third last thing is that I personally believe when I joined my company that I should bring more and more developers to the open source world. So when I joined my company, there were like 30 contributors to that project, and currently it's nearly 200. And it's only a year. It's the project is very complex and things, but I encourage new developers to come and contribute. And for that, I personally believe we should celebrate whenever a new developer contributes to open source. Maybe by recognition, maybe posting on our company's social media channels, maybe giving some swags. These are very helpful. So I created a program like this, which helped a lot.
Oh, thanks. You also answered the question which I was about to ask to Vaishnavi. So, folks, we have Vaishnavi as well. She works at anitab.org. She works as an open source admin there. She has been contributing to FOSS since 2019. And she has experience developing Python and Kotlin. So welcome, Vaishnavi.
Thank you.
So yeah, on the same note, for the beginners, like he said, they feel overwhelming, once they start contributing to FOSS, right? So should they directly jump to contribution, or should they get familiar with the project itself? Start using as a somebody who is using as like let's say I'm planning to use some software in my daily life, maybe a mailing list manager, right? So what is your suggestion for the open source beginner to get started to contribute to FOSS?
My suggestion, and mostly I would say what works for me, is mostly these projects who are maintained at a large scale, they are very good at their documentation. So start reading the documentation first. Then if you find some errors or bugs in the documentation, start contributing to documentation. It's not like open source is just limited to code. There's design, there's quality assurance, there's testing. You can contribute in other ways as first. Then what happens is after a week or two, you get understanding of the code. See, like I am doing this, then this happens. So that way you can start contributing to code later, and you can contribute to other ways first. Then the second way is to find mentors. Like most of the cities here in India, they have good tech communities, both online and offline. So there will be people who are willing to go above and beyond. Just the question is if you ask. If you don't ask, then there's nothing. So if we can find a good mentor, and we can also give back to the community later once we get used to the project and all, that is one way. And how many of you know open source programs here that you can contribute to? Can anyone name them? More? Okay, now tell me, after October is over, do you contribute to open source again?
No more t-shirts after that, sorry.
If you get your GSOC stipend, do you contribute? Do you open GitHub again? So it's like, not just don't focus on the programs, don't focus on the benefits. It's like in the long run, you will get something out of it in some way or the other. It's not like कि GSOC कर दिया, LinkedIn पे डाल दिया, title हो जाएगा. It's like once what happens is you get used to the community atmosphere, and you feel like these people, they are just not like some maintainers or some mentors. If you like ask them. There have been instances where I messaged them at 1 p.m. I was doing some debugging and I messaged them at 1 p.m. And 1:10 I get a reply. They are also like there. So if you are at a level, they also prioritize you. If I am some sort of a silent observer, so I'm just giving an example. If I'm an observer and I'm not included anywhere, they will take time, but they'll reply you. But if you are being involved in the community, you will also get benefits out of it. And speaking of programs, you can contribute to. GitHub is also like has Octantship right now. Then there's LFX, which has a great mentorship program, and GSOC is there, GSOD is there, and
Yeah.
Anita B, yeah. So what we do is mostly GSOC, I'm not naming any programs, but they are for experienced sort of developers. So Anita B, they have an own program called Open Source Hack. So it runs usually 3 times a year, and there we have good first issues. We like what the contributors are generally expected is we focus on 4 ways of contributing to open source. So all sort of levels we have on 4 ways. And once you get the 4 contributions done to our projects, you'll get gift cards or certificates like that. And there's Open Source Day as well. So Open Source Day, it's like a extension of Grasshopper Celebration, which is one of the world's largest conferences for women in tech. And that way you can contribute as well.
Thanks. We are next is Anas Khan. Quick question. With the ever increasing accessibility of internet and computers, right? Why it is important to switch to free and open source software?
All right, so hello everyone, I'm Anas Khan. And why should we switch to open source? So I'll answer this in 2 parts. First of them is why should you be contributing to open source? Now, I'd like to ask how many of you here had the first operating system as Windows? That comes by default, right? That's the answer I was looking for. It comes by default, and almost everyone here has used Windows. Now, the reason why Windows was our first operating system was because it was very convenient for us to get started with that. On top of it, it was developed by Microsoft by pouring in hundreds and thousands of dollars. And on top of it, it came out of the box. Had it been a situation where Linux was out of the box for most of us, or had it been a situation that Linux was easier for us to get started with, like to install and get started with. So that way, we could have already had better alternatives, and we would have not been stuck into the Microsoft ecosystem. So that's one way of looking at it, is that you contribute to open source so that you give back to your community. Next is, when you contribute to open source, you also make sure that your code lives on forever. So it's not behind any paywall or any software subscription or anything of that sort. It's open source. Anyone can have a look at it and get inspired or work further on it. Now I'll talk about the second half of the equation. Of the question was, why should you employ it, or why should you be using open source software in your day-to-day life? Now I'll just give you one simple statement, and that will make sense to everyone around here. If you use an open source flashlight application, it will not ask you for your location permission. Does that make sense, right? I mean, we have seen instances of big tech companies, let's say Meta, Facebook, and Google. They have huge, enormous data collection for their users, and since it's private in nature and it's proprietary, we never know how much of data is being consumed, collected and processed, and a lot of things that way. So for privacy and security, open source, the code is readily available for everyone out there to read, to understand, and to make sense of it, and also to be sure, to be peer reviewed that the code and your privacy is not at risk. And furthermore, what you can also do is, you understand that the fact that open source applications are usually cost effective, or rather very easy to begin with. I mean, if you are stuck in ecosystem of Microsoft, you are using their suite, Microsoft Office, and you're buying the license, and you're a cash cow for them for, let's say, years to come. But if you instead use some software such as Open Office or something of that sort, well, that is an open source application, and you're saving much on the money side as well. And lastly, I would like to talk about the freedom and customizability that open source application always have. So recently, Microsoft introduced, back in 2016, Microsoft introduced Windows 10, and recently Microsoft introduced Windows 11. Now, these versions of Windows have limitations, such as TMP, that's a chip inside your hardware that you need to run these versions of Windows. Whereas Linux, well, it comes on all different flavors, all different versions. It can run on probably a PC having 512 megabits of RAM and also on servers and everything in between. So that's the reason why you should be employing open source software. And lastly, that open source software lives forever. So by a few sessions earlier, we talked about WordStar, right? And WordStar was a proprietary application which died. And I mean, nobody at this point in time uses WordStar, and you probably must have not even heard of it. But the point I'm trying to make is, your document did not get to live forever because WordStar was proprietary. Had it been something like, right now Microsoft is pushing, or it comes default with RTF, that is rich text format. Had it been something that if you use Markdown, that's an open source standard, your documents or your files or whatever thing you're working on lives on forever. So that was the reasons why I would recommend and ejaculate open source for everyone out there. Be if you are a developer that you want to contribute, or if you are just an end consumer, you should be using more open source application. Thank you.
Thanks. So we have question for Dhiraj. So can you share your experience with mentoring, at Google Summer of Code for 52° North, right, organization?
I haven't started yet because GSOC hasn't started yet, but
Okay.
I can still just talk like.
So if you could just share the process, if somebody is willing to mentor, how they could apply for this, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who are interested to help others, right?
Yeah, sure. Am I audible till? Okay, cool. So Google Summer of Code is like the people who don't know, it's an open source program sponsored by Google. It requires application for different organizations which has open source projects, and they want to take some interns for the summer and work on some features for those projects, and they apply to Google. Google selects them, and that's how those organizations get selected. Now every project comes along with a mentor who is gonna be there, who will select the mentee who's gonna work on the project, along with how the project will go ahead, what the guiding part and everything comes along with it. So that's the normal the process of Google Summer of Code. Now mentoring doesn't come like it's not just like open to everyone. It's more based to who organization wants to work with for this project. The project I'm going to mentor will be the project I was working on last time as a Google Summer of Code participant last year. So yeah, I was working for the project which was about adding voice commands, just like OK Google, but for the different application. So yeah, and they liked the work I did, and they did understand that I have more knowledge in the organization than others in terms of that project. So I was asked to mentor for the project.
Thanks. Since we are running out of time, we'll take one question from the audience for Dhiraj or somebody who wants to pick. Any question from the audience? Okay, Jannat.
Yeah. So my question was to you talked about dealing with the community for an open source project. So what if you come across, suppose you're an open source maintainer and you come across a situation where everyone in your community has different opinion on a feature or how it needs to be. How do you deal with conflicts in the community?
So every open source project have a team, have a roadmap as well, in which things are decided, and there is hardly obviously every open source project first listens to the community, but whenever there is a conflict, the team, the higher leadership decides this, what is on the product roadmap basically. So that time this thing gives the most priority, like the product roadmap.
What if it's at the cost of upsetting the community?
Now it's very, it's like politics now. I don't think it will be like this. Like four persons are there and A, B, C, D, four options. Everyone is clicking 111. There will be obviously slightly more to some option and slightly less to some other. But still, if it's close, then the team decides. This is how things are done.
So I agree with what Saurav been saying. I wanted to talk about actually the OSS community part from the organization part, continuing Saurav. But the question you asked was like in my mind that I'm pretty sure that someone will ask, because usually there are contributors who get too attached with the software or get too attached with the organization. Like currently Linux is having like Rust inside the kernel and everyone is getting upset like, oh, why do you want to change to C, C++ is already there, why do you want to add another language? Which makes sense, but as an organization or as a maintainer, you don't want anyone to get upset, obviously. And the way it can be tackled is by giving or having a healthy discussion on that topic, by giving them reasons that why the action may not be taken by the team or something like that, right? Apart from that, like there are a bunch of other open source organizations which takes weekly office hours or something like that. Those are also really helpful in terms of this, because that gives more insight from what team has been thinking in terms of roadmap or other things. So yeah, that is also helpful in terms of that.
Thanks for answering the question. So thank you everyone for listening, and all the panelists to share your experience and answering the questions. Like I said, if you have any further questions from our panelists, they'll be available for the tea break right now. Thank you.